So far, we have talked about two types of markets. Perfect competition, where firms are selling identical products and there are many sellers or potential sellers, so that firms are price takers. And monopoly, where a firm is selling a unique product and there's only one firm. So that the firm is not a price taker, but is able to, in some degree, set its own price, right? With the influence of consumer demand in there, right? They can't just raise it to as high as they want because nobody will buy the product, right? But these two market structures are pretty uncommon. With perfect competition, we see this in things like agricultural products, right? An ear of corn is an ear of corn. Doesn't really matter which farmer or farm you buy it from. And that's not really something that's very widespread outside of that type of product, right? There are some instances, but there are very few. Right? On the other side, you have monopoly. Monopolies are pretty rare, other than some kind of subcategories, right? Unless you've got patent protection, so monopolists on a new invention or new drug, something like that. That's where we see that most of the time. But most products don't really fall into that category either. Right? Most of the time, what we're going to see is something more akin to monopolistic competition. In monopolistic competition, there are a large number of firms selling a similar but not identical product. So, large number of firms selling a similar but not identical product. So we're gonna start out big and kind of work our way down, but I want us to consider the market for shoes, right? When you go out to buy shoes, the market for that good does not look like perfect competition, right? There is not a single shoe. When you say, I'm gonna go buy some new shoes, people aren't expecting you to come back with the exact same pair of shoes that they're wearing, that you were wearing, and that everybody else is wearing, right? There's more than one type of shoe. So they are similar, right? All shoes, arguably, whether we're talking about boots, sneakers, sandals, high heels, whatever it is, they are all similar in that they are footwear, right? But they're not identical, right? And even if we kind of narrow it down even from there and say, well, let's just look at boots, right? Well, those aren't all identical either. There's not just one type of boot, right? You have kind of the more Western cowboy type boots. You have lace up kind of hiking boots. You have probably more types of boots than I know about, right? So again, these products are similar, right? They are boots, they're all boots, but they're not identical, right? And we can continue to narrow that down, right? We go to kind of our Western / cowboy boots, then there are different brands, right, of those boots with different features, right? So again, this is what we're gonna see more commonly, right? This is monopolistic competition. Many sellers selling similar products, but not identical products, right? So they're similar, so that's somewhat like the perfect competition where there's competition, right? That's why we have monopolistic competition. Firms are still competing with each other, but so they are still competing with each other, but it's not as fierce of competition because there are differences in their product, right? We're going to get to this later in a little bit more detail, or I'm probably just going to repeat the same thing I'm saying. In any case, if someone in monopolistic competition raises their price, right? If I am selling boots and I raise the price of my boots, some of my consumers are going to switch to another boot maker because the price is lower and they are close enough substitutes that that individual would rather go pay less for those boots. But not all of my customers are going to go away because my boots are different. They might have some features that this consumer likes more than the competitors. So again, it's a mixture between monopoly and perfect competition. Firms in monopolistic competition do have to face competition from other firms selling similar products, but like in monopoly, the firms in firms in monopolistic competition aren't price takers. They can change the price of their product without losing all of their customers, because while their product is not completely unique, it does have, or it would have, some unique features. All right, speaking of features, let's look at some of the features of monopolistic competition. Some of these we might have already kind of run through, but we'll go through them once again. All right, so there are three features of monopolistic competition. Right? First, there are many sellers and potential sellers. This is similar to what we saw in perfect competition. Firms can enter or exit the market freely. Again, we saw this in perfect competition. In monopolistic competition, there was no free entry. There were barriers to entry, right? So whether we're talking about patents, whether we're talking about economies of scale, government issued kind of monopolies, so on and so forth. And each firm sells a product somewhat different from its competitors. So kind of looking at these one at a time, we're not going to spend too much time on this one. It's kind of obvious, or it's not obvious, but it's not that difficult to understand. So like in kind of what I just said, like in perfect competition, there are many sellers and potential sellers. So firms in monopolistic competition do not have control of the market. They don't have full control, really. Their market share is not as powerful, right? Or their market power is not as far-reaching as, say, a monopolist's market power, where a monopolist has complete control of the market because there are no competitors. Monopolistic competition, there are still competitors, right? Somebody's going to be selling a product that's very similar to yours. So you are going to have to worry about price in regard to, you want to minimize your price insofar as you want to attract more customers to you and away from your competitors. Right, when we talk about free entry and exit, this again is similar to our perfect competition. And this is telling us that above zero profits are going to attract new entrants. Right, so in perfect competition and in monopolistic competition, if a firm is making above zero profits, right, and these are economic profits, then that's going to attract new entrants into that market. They're going to look and say, well, this person is making money, so I'm going to do the same thing and try to make money as well. So if price is above average total cost, and we can remember our formula for profit, right, or at least one of them, price minus average total cost times quantity. If price is greater than average total cost, that means there's going to be a positive economic profit, right? Firms or other people will see that and they will enter the market. When price is less than average total cost, firms will be making a loss or a negative profit, so they will exit the market. And when price equals average total cost, there will be no entry into the market or exit. Right? People are getting that zero economic profit, and so that's where they'll stay. There's no profit to be had, so no economic profit to be had, so new firms won't enter the market, and firms in the market are taking care of all of their explicit and implicit costs, right? Remember our definition of economic profit, so it's not just taking into account those explicit costs, the ones that you have to pay for with cash, but also those implicit costs. So if you have zero economic profits, you're making enough money to cover all of your explicit costs and then also covering the cost of your time, right? Your opportunity cost. If, let's say, if I went into boot making, I would have to make enough money to pay for all the materials and the other inputs and make enough money to cover my salary as an instructor. That's my next best option, which I would probably argue it was. Right, I'd probably argue it's my first best option because I don't know how to make boots. But regardless, right, so you'd be covering all that, so you'd be satisfied. You wouldn't exit the market either. Also, we're going to see this in a moment, right? With free entry and exit, firms are going to enter if the price is greater than average total cost. And they will enter until price equals average total cost. So in the long run, in monopolistic competition, economic profits are going to be zero, just like they were in perfect competition. But there are some other differences. All right, product differentiation, this is our third feature, right? Firms are selling goods that are somewhat like their competitors, right? But they are different, right? They're similar, but not identical. That is product differentiation, and that's really the key feature of monopolistic competition and what sets it apart from perfect competition and monopoly. So firms can differentiate their products on a lot of different dimensions, really any dimension that a consumer would care about. So something basic like taste, and here we're going kind of food and drink style. Your book kind of mentions that there are three major kind of fast food hamburger joints in the nation, right? Wendy's, Burger King, McDonald's. They all sell hamburgers, but probably everybody has a favorite because people have different tastes, right? And these firms have differentiated their product based on taste. And this applies for I mean, really any food and drink products, right? Changing the way it tastes is going to change who likes it and who doesn't, right? A hamburger is not a hamburger no matter who makes it. Each person's going to try to change that recipe slightly. Anything else, right, goes the same for that, right? Any other types of things, that's pretty much it, right? If it takes different taste, actual taste, and when we're talking about the senses, that is one way to differentiate your product. All right, style is another way that products could be differentiated. So, for instance, similar to kind of what I was talking about earlier with the boots, if you go into any store that sells clothing and you go to buy some jeans, right, you're not going to just walk up to a wall where they've got a sign that just says jeans and pick your size and then leave, right? There are a bunch of different styles, whether you're looking at slim fit, boot cut, straight cut, and then a bunch more. That's kind of where I stopped paying attention. But there are a lot of different styles, whether we're talking about in the same brand, or if you go outside of the brand, right? Wrangler jeans are not the same as Levi's, right? They're not the same as jeans you would get from American Eagle or any other store. Right? For my mother, right, her favorite color is red. So if she's looking at two products and one is red and they're of similar quality, the only difference is one's red, one's a different color, she's probably going to pick the one that's red, right? And that's just a style thing, right? Doesn't really, but it is a way for those products to be differentiated. Right, probably the big one, features. What features does it have? Your book mentions cell phones, right? There are a lot of different types of cell phones, right? Whether we're talking about an iPhone or some kind of, Samsung, Motorola. I don't know if they're a company that still makes phones anymore, but if they are, Motorola, so on and so forth. There are a lot of different features, right? One of the big kind of differentiations between Apple products, and I'll just group Androids in as a whole, is Androids have open source software. So if you are gifted with technical stuff, right, if you're interested in computer science and coding and things, you might be drawn more to an Android because you could go in and you could play around with some stuff, right, where you can't really do that with an iPhone. All right, and then location. Location is another way to differentiate your product. Kind of the classic example of this is if you think about anything you would buy at a gas station versus at, say, Walmart or another actual store, the prices in the gas station are always going to be higher, right? Why is that? Well, because they're more convenient, right? There's a gas station right down the road from where I live. A lot of times if I just need something small, I'll run down there instead of driving all the way to Walmart, because I don't mind spending a couple extra cents because it's more convenient, right? And that's why they can charge that higher price, right? The product is different, right? A 2 liter of Dr. Pepper from that store and from Walmart, pretty much the same, except I don't have to drive as far to get the the 2 liter Dr. Pepper at that gas station, right? So convenience, location, that also can be a way of differentiating your product. All right, so now we're going to talk about the monopolistic competition model. So I've drawn 2 graphs up here. The reason for that is because this first graph, we're going to look at monopolistic competition in the short run. All right, so we can kind of imagine this as, in the extreme case, let's say that this firm has just opened up. They're the only ones in an area, a convenient area. So in all, for all purposes, they're the only firm. All right, we're going to set up our model. It's going to look very similar to our model for monopolistic competition. All right, we've got a downward sloping demand curve and a downward sloping marginal revenue curve, which is similar to monopoly rather than perfect competition. All right, this stems from that product differentiation. All right, again, if you start charging a higher price for your good, if it's identical to all other goods, then nobody's going to buy yours, right? That's what we saw in perfect competition. That's why we saw a flat demand curve for an individual firm. If your product is unique, like in monopoly, or in some way unique, right? Similar but not identical, like in monopolistic competition, then if you raise your price, you might lose some customers, but you're not going to lose all of them. So again, that's why we're going to have this downward sloping demand curve and a downward sloping marginal revenue curve. All right, so we have our demand curve, our marginal revenue curve, our marginal cost curve, and our average total cost curve. So the profit maximizing level of output, we're going to find it the exact same way we found it for perfect competition and monopoly. Firms are going to maximize their profit where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So we look for the intersection of our marginal cost, marginal revenue curve. So that's going to give us our price in the short run and our quantity in the short run. And this rectangle here, which there's not a lot of blue surrounding it, so all right, there's no way you can see that, but this blue rectangle right between price and average total cost, so right where our quantity hits that average total cost curve, that's going to give us that average total cost. So the rectangle that's formed by where we hit the demand curve, where our quantity hits the average total cost curve, and where it hits the price axis and goes up to price, that is our profit, right? So that's, again, price minus average total cost, which would go right here, times quantity. That would be the area of this rectangle, and that's the formula for profit, or one of them. All right, so we can see that in the short run, a firm could make positive economic profits, right? But as we've already discussed, that's going to draw in new entrants, right? New firms are going to come in to this market, and that is going to drive down demand for our original good, right? So if this is, let's just for simplicity's sake, let's say that this is a graph for our good. We're in monopolistic competition, and this is our good, right? Well, after a while that we're making these positive economic profits, more firms are going to come in. They're going to say, those guys are making money, we can too. We're going to jump in there and get some of that money. All right, so with the new firms coming in, now some of our customers are likely to go to those other firms, right? Because they've differentiated in some way that our customers like. We're also not the only game in town, so people can go somewhere else. That's going to decrease demand for our good. And specifically, over time, it's going to decrease demand until our average total cost curve is tangent or lying up against the demand curve where our profit maximizing level of output is. Right, so that our average total cost at the quantity in the long run equals the price in the long run, so that when we do our profit calculation, price minus average total cost times quantity, right? Price and average total cost are equal, so when we subtract the two, we get zero. Zero times anything is zero, so we get these zero economic profits. So that is our model. All right, one thing that I want to point out that we're going to talk about in just a second is if you look at either of these graphs, whether we're talking about the short run or we're talking about the long run, the price is higher than the marginal cost, right? So our marginal cost we would get by carrying over where our quantity intersects the marginal cost curve, carrying it over the side. So here, our marginal cost, right, somewhere in here, all right, that's below price. Here, again, marginal cost is somewhere around here, and that's also below cost. So below price. So our marginal cost is less than our price. Right, so why is this important? The reason this is important is because if we're looking at, well, the reason this is important is, and we're going to mention this again, or actually let's start with why they can do this. All right, so we've already talked essentially about why or firms in monopolistic competition are able to price above marginal cost. And again, it comes down to that idea of product differentiation. Right? If your good is slightly different, that means that when you raise the price, you're not going to lose all your customers. Right? Some are going to stay because they like the features, the style, the taste, all right, of your product more than your competitors. All right? That is not the case in perfect competition. Raise your price a little bit in perfect competition, your consumers are going to go to zero because they can find the exact same product somewhere else. Monopolistic competition, they can't find the exact same product somewhere else. They're going to either have to sacrifice some features that they like for a lower price or pay more for the features that they like. Another feature of this is that when firms reduce output to increase price in monopolistic competition, they're also changing where they hit their average total cost curve. Right? Normally, you would hit your average total cost curve, or we'll say a firm in perfect competition, right? They would be where their demand curve, or where their quantity hits the average total cost curve, it's going to be at the bottom, right? Firms in perfect competition have to minimize their costs in order to compete, in order to get to that place where they're making zero economic profits. All right, that's not the case with these firms, right? These firms in monopolistic competition, right? When they increase their price, or really when they reduce output so that they can increase price, they're going to shift along that average total cost curve, and they're no longer going to be at the bottom of it. So that you could be making this good for cheaper, right? You could be making more of it, and it could be cheaper. And if price is above marginal cost, that means that the price kind of tells us what consumers are willing to pay, right? So if price is above marginal cost, it means that the benefit on a kind of total scale, we can think of it as total surplus, right? Total surplus would go up by more than it would go down due to these costs, right? The benefit is greater than the cost of producing this item. The benefit that a consumer would get is greater than the cost to the producer of making this item. So we could increase total surplus by increasing production and lowering price. Right, but that doesn't end up happening. So this leads us to the last thing that we're going to talk about in this video. Right, is monopolistic competition inefficient, right? Firms are not minimizing their costs, right? Total surplus isn't as large as it should be. So is this inefficient? Well, the answer to that is that kind of, but some of the other things that we get out of this are positive and usually are seen to outweigh any negatives, right? So with product differentiation, we get newer products, so kind of new innovation, or we're more likely to get this innovation. We're going to get just different types of products as firms in these markets experiment and see what features people like, or just introducing new things, right? So, I never really thought I would go into a store that just sells dog treats, but I did somewhat recently down on Governor's, right? That store wouldn't exist without monopolistic competition. Nobody would say, hey, people like their pets, right? There are all these pet stores. What if I just make a store that sells, I don't think it was just dog treats, but it was a lot of just stuff just for dogs, right? We're just gonna sell all this stuff, right? We're gonna sell all of these dried out cow hooves and whatnot. Again, maybe a bad example, but the point is, right, we're going to get these new products, right, in kind of monopolistic competition, right? We're also going to get better matching for customers, right? So the more niche, the more specified a product is, right, that's trying to offer these types of features, right, the more likely that you're going to find exactly what you're looking for. So for this, kind of the thing that first popped into my mind was dating sites, right? So if you are going to go online and do one of these dating sites, I would imagine they're all more or less the same. The goal in the end is to find a partner, right? Whether you're looking for a permanent partner or a temporary one, right? Whatever's the case, right? But they're all serving essentially the same function, but there's not just one, right? There's not just one dating site that's doing the basic service and that's it, right? There are tons of them, and they're very specific in some cases, right? So you have things like kind of the big overarching ones, eHarmony, Plenty of Fish, I think, is one. But then you also have the kind of specific ones, right? Christian Mingle. Actually, I think, no, Plenty of Fish is just a standard one. If it's not, it doesn't really matter. But, you think stuff like Christian Mingle, J-Date. You have ones I would imagine geared for any kind of sexual orientation, right? You also have things like Farmers Only, right? Where you are specifically trying to date other farmers, right? And that kind of specificity and that increase in the level of matching products to consumers, right, is generally seen as a good thing, right? Because if you're a farmer and you know that you want to meet, you like farming, you know that odds are that the person you meet is going to need to like farming and be willing to do farming stuff, right? Then that's probably a good reason to use Farmers Only, right? So this increase in kind of newer products, right? This increase in the level of matching services to consumers, right? Getting more specific and kind of really increasing the benefit of using those services, right? That tends to outweigh the negative impacts of inefficiency, right? The loss of total surplus that we get from the monopolistic firm not maximizing total surplus. All right, but that is it for this video. In the next video, we're going to continue looking into this chapter, and we're going to be talking about advertising, right? Advertising is going to be very important for monopolistic competition because your products are similar but slightly different, so you need to tell your customers why yours is better, right? But I'll see you in the next video.